Hi folks, it's Elliot here from Evolve ETFs. Today I'd like to talk to you about cybersecurity investing, a little bit about why we're so excited about the cybersecurity industry and why we think it belongs in investors' portfolios. Cybersecurity is a unique area of growth in the technology space. It's something that's not well represented through the tech component of the large indices, and it's a place where we think a lot of investors may have overlooked the opportunity for their portfolios. First of all, I think we need to talk about cybersecurity in the context of our lives. There's an increasing number of network devices in everybody's life. You may have heard the term Internet of Things, and that really talks about all the different things in our lives that are connected to the internet. So obviously there's your computer and your laptop and maybe your tablet and your phone. And of course we think of these things as computers. But in addition to that, have you considered that your smartwatch, your thermostat, or even your car may well also have a connection to the internet? That's what people mean when they talk about the Internet of Things. And really, as there are more things out there that are connected to the internet, the need for cybersecurity to secure those things continues to grow. In addition to that, each of these devices becomes smart only because it connects to data services provided in what people call the cloud. Each of those data centers and all of those companies rely on cybersecurity to ensure that the data they're providing to their customers is safe. And this is your personal data, so it matters to each and every one of us. It's estimated that by 2025, there'll be 75 billion connected devices installed worldwide. And that's almost triple the current number, which is estimated to be 26 billion. It's simply an astonishing number of devices, and this is why the demand for cybersecurity services, products, and technologies continues to grow. Sometimes the Internet of Things extends to devices that don't even have any chips in them. There's one Internet of Things device that we all carry around with us that nobody really thought of until recently, and that's your credit card. Capital One was hacked recently, and we'll talk about that a little later in the video. Only 38% of global organizations right now claim that they are very well prepared for a cyber attack. So I think if we let that sink in and we realize that each of us has devices in our lives that require cybersecurity, obviously every company has devices that they need to be secure as well. So with only 38% claiming that they're ready for a cybersecurity attack, that leaves a lot of room for growth before every company gets to where they need to be. Cybercriminals made off with an estimated $45 billion in 2018. And that number, the amount of money that cybercrime is expected to generate for the criminals, is estimated to grow to $6 trillion by 2021. To put that in context, that's the same as the GDP of Japan. So these are really the two sides of the cybercrime story. You have more devices that are vulnerable to attack, and more criminals with increasingly sophisticated methods seeking to attack those devices. Between those two sides of the cyber story is cybersecurity. These are the technologies and the companies that are providing security for all of our data and preventing that crime from happening. That's ultimately why we believe this is a really important investment focus for investors today. So as I mentioned, one of the Internet of Things devices that was compromised recently were the credit cards at Capital One. On July 19th, Capital One announced that a hacker had gained access to more than 100 million customer accounts and credit card applications. That included 1 million Canadian social insurance numbers, 140,000 US social security numbers, and 80,000 bank account numbers, in addition to an undisclosed number of people's names, addresses, credit scores, credit limits, balances, and other personal information. So according to Capital One, the breach affected around 100 million people in the US and 6 million people in Canada. When you think about that, that's pretty much everybody you know, there's bound to be somebody who uses a Capital One credit card that was compromised or has otherwise had their data taken from them. Obviously the stock price was hit when this announcement came out. The stock dropped around 8% in the first week when the news broke in July, and since then they're down about 13.7%. This ultimately is why CEOs and the boards of company are insisting on continuing to spend more money on cybersecurity. Obviously, Capital One had cybersecurity systems in place, but they were insufficient. At this point in time, they're going to spend more money cleaning up after their hack and redoubling their efforts. And of course, all their competition are going to be learning from this and also increasing their focus on cybersecurity. The bottom line is when cybercrime happens, obviously everybody loses, except of course for the cybersecurity companies who gain new customers and increase their share of wallet with their existing customers. Capital One says it expects to spend between $100 and $150 million cleaning up the attack. Obviously, nobody's happy to see cybercrime happen, but when you hold cybersecurity companies in your portfolio, you can be among those who are on the winning end of some of this spend. Now, it doesn't just happen to private companies, and it doesn't just happen to the Internet of Things. As we saw in Louisiana recently, cybercrime can also affect your kids. Louisiana's governor has declared a state of emergency over cybersecurity after a series of attacks shut down phones and locked and encrypted data in 3 of the state's school districts. Now, obviously nobody was physically at risk as a result of this, but it certainly interrupted the school days of many children, and certainly their parents were concerned. Unlike most companies that have been hit by ransomware and can handle those attacks privately, states and municipalities are forced to make these payments and the attacks public. The publicity around these attacks often forces governments to quickly pay up and get the systems back online, and then of course they need to try to find ways to secure them again, causing a greater spend of state and local budgets. Once again, this is a painful cycle that continues with no end in sight. Louisiana is not the only state that's been affected. Increasingly, there have been cyber attacks all across the US, including other states such as Georgia, Colorado, Maryland, and Florida. In Atlanta, there was a cyber attack that forced the city to enter into emergency contracts worth $2.7 million to restore the computer system. Colorado, their Department of Transportation paid a $1.5 million ransom. Baltimore, also a victim of cyber attack, approved a $10 million payment to the cyber criminals. Ultimately, this is what cybersecurity is all about. When data is taken hostage and the ransom is paid, the business model exists for attackers to attack more data. Cybersecurity is all about keeping the attackers out. Ultimately, everybody understands that if they pay for prevention and they pay for cybersecurity services, it's going to cost less than paying the ransom to get their data back at the end. Unfortunately, this is the reality of the world that we live in today, but it's also the reason why we think investing in cybersecurity companies is such an important thing for people to consider in their portfolios. Okay, so how do we protect ourselves from cybercrime? Well, the first step is be vigilant. Check your financial statements, check your bank balances, make sure that all the transactions that you see are transactions that you've done. Anything suspicious, raise the red flag right away. Banks and other institutions will be always willing and ready to help you, especially if they think that you've been compromised. Secondly, only provide personal information when you know it's a trusted source. It may sound obvious, but don't give out your personal information to somebody that you don't know. Thirdly, as we've been talking about for years, be careful opening email attachments. Don't open attachments from people you don't know. Never give out your computer password to anybody, even if it sounds like they're your IT department or a trusted source. And of course, install antivirus software on your computer, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's scanning your email attachments, and always make sure that your computer is running the latest version of the software. The computer company and the software companies work very hard to make sure that they're up to date with any attacks, and that's your part to make sure that those new pieces of software are installed. Okay, so what does this mean for investors? How do you invest in cybersecurity, and where does it belong in your portfolio? First of all, consider a cybersecurity ETF as a single stock replacement so that you're properly diversified across many cybersecurity companies. There's so much room in this space, there's no one company that's going to own the whole thing. Secondly, look at your tech exposure. How much tech do you have in the very large cap tech giants like the FANG stocks? Maybe you need to have some exposure to cybersecurity companies as well, because if there's an attack on software that is from one of those companies, oftentimes you'll find the cybersecurity companies do well while that company's stock does not do well as a result of the news of the attack. How can you invest in cybersecurity companies? Well, that's why we built the Evolve Cybersecurity Index ETF. The ticker is Cyber, CYBR, and it's available for sale on the TSX. We invest in a portfolio of cybersecurity companies so that you're well diversified across the sector. This ETF had great performance in 2018. It was actually ranked as the #1 best performing unlevered equity ETF on the TSX that year. We're very excited to have recently celebrated the 2nd anniversary of Cyber, the first ETF in Canada to invest in the cybersecurity industry. And it's available in hedged and unhedged classes, as well as a US dollar class, and even as a mutual fund. So please talk to your financial advisor to find out if cybersecurity investing is something that's right for you. Thanks very much for watching. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button so other people can discover our videos. Talk to you next time.